Hello, Your Black World family, Breaking Brown family, and those of you who have been following the news this morning, following Your Black World, Breaking Brown, you know that the Officer Ben Fields, who dumped the teenage student in Spring Valley High School from her chair and dragged her across the floor like a rag doll, you know that he has been fired. I am very happy about that. That's a development that I am pleased by. What I am not pleased by, however, is the reaction that I am seeing from a lot of people in the African American community. I mean, let's be honest. Let's just have an honest conversation. I've seen a lot of people on my page and other people's pages talk about how the girl shouldn't have had her phone out. We saw Raven Symone said, yes, I know this officer has been, accused of excessive force and police brutality, but why she have her phone out? Why your phone out? Why you Instagramming? I mean, that's what Raven Symone said, and it was on After the View. There's a clip of it. You can go to naturallymoa.com. And normally I don't like to touch on these sorts of things. I consider this stuff as normally unimportant. I like to talk mostly about systemic racism, but this is a problem. And this is not a problem in terms of what we're dealing with the outside community, in terms of what we're dealing with, in terms of just how Black children are being treated in schools. This is also a problem of how that treatment is reacted to by people in the Black community. I mean, let's think about it. Right after this happened, we had Don Lemon come out and said, well, we was talking to Sonny Hostin on CNN. Well, there has to be another reason. Let's give the police officer the benefit of the doubt. And really and truthfully, unless the girl was holding a gun, there would have been no reason for this police officer to dump her from that chair and use that level of force. There was no excuse for that. And Don Lemon should be ashamed of himself, but he's not. He makes a good living, being the chief propagandist at CNN. He makes a good living being the black face that is used to scare the rest of Black people against other Black people. I mean, the rest of white people against other Black people. That's what he does. He uses himself. He's a black face, and he uses his black face to sort of push this sort of fear about other people. Those Black people aren't like me. I grew up in a good neighborhood. I'm not like those hood Black people. I don't sag my pants. I see as a good Negro. So that's what he does. And meanwhile, the white people that he's talking to, their kids are wearing black fingernails and blue hair and all sorts of things. The girls have thongs on and the low-riding pants, but nobody says anything about that. So Don Lemon came out initially and said he was the first one to pile on what I call the Blame Blacks First Brigade. Don Lemon is one of, we have this thing going on in our community where if a Black person does something wrong, there are a cohort of Black people to say, oh, this person must have deserved it. So that's what Lemon did. Don Lemon said, let's step back and let's get all the facts. And so that we can find a way to rationalize what this police officer did to this girl. There must have been a reason for it. And I, Don Lemon, work for CNN. I, Don Lemon, am going to find a reason to vindicate this police officer. If you give me a little while, Sonny. Give me a little while. That's what he was debating on CNN. Give me a little while, because this police officer is good and he had to do something. We have to get all the facts. Well, the facts are there's no reason for this level of force in the classroom. That's the fact. So when you look at it, that alone is enough to make a person irate. Made me irate. But even when there's something that Don Lemon refused to learn. Don Lemon was all about learning what happened. What was the police officer doing this? And, what was going on with him? And what happened beforehand? And, have we all considered what's going on in the police officer's head? But no one considered what was going on with the young lady. And there was a report by Sean King this morning of the Daily News where he basically said this girl was an orphan who had just lost her mother. And think about that. Think about not only losing your mother. I know people who have breakdowns when they grow up. And they're fully grown people with families and lose a parent and lose it all. This was a young girl, a teenager, is in high school, and she lost a parent. And this is what happens to her. And not only does she get abused by that officer in her school, you have all these Black people going around social media talking about, well, these kids these days are so awful and these kids are out of control. What do you mean by these kids? Do you mean by these kids that you raised? If these kids are out of control, what does it say about you? And the second thing is, let's stop talking about how these kids are out of control. If you want to talk about a situation, talk about that specific situation. Talk about this girl and what happened between this girl and the confrontation with this officer. That's all that matters. It doesn't matter what you feel about the kid who hangs his pants and the kid down the street, as if you didn't do anything when you were younger. Kids are defiant. Teenagers are defiant. Teenagers talk back, and they're especially defiant when they're going through things, when they're hurt and when they're in pain. But instead of finding out what was going on with this girl and finding out, what would make her pull out her phone, which is really not even a huge deal. Because as far as I'm concerned, the teacher who called the resource officer, who called the administrator, who then called the resource officer, created more of a disturbance in class than the kid who pulled out her phone. I mean, we have this Facebook, we have social media. The girl may have been checking on something else. I don't know what she was doing on her phone. And the class looked reasonably quiet. So, this whole idea that by doing this, she was disrupting the classroom is something that, I don't agree with it. There was a young man who, in the interviews up on Breaking Brown, who said that the girl basically didn't do anything wrong, and she was kind of begging the teacher, don't send me to the principal's office for this. But I see grown black people pile on and start talking about how awful these kids are. You don't like your own kids? And if you don't, what does that say about you? What does that say about who we are as adults and what we're doing and how we are leading these kids? And it's just, we don't want to get all the facts. We don't want to protect the kid. We don't want to protect this girl who went through whatever she went through and then got beaten down. This cop pulled her out of the chair like she was an MMA fighter. And he was an MMA fighter. And they were going toe to toe, pound for pound, blow for blow. And I saw black people rationalize that. I saw black people say, well, she must have done something. And nobody stepped back to say, well, except for Sean King this morning in the story, nobody stepped back to say, hey, what's going on in her world? How is she? Is she okay? Was something going on in her life? Who was she reaching out to? What is her disciplinary history at the school? And none of that, even if she had been a child who had been in trouble for all of her time at the school, none of that still would have justified the level of force that this officer uses. So I want black people, especially black parents, to really think about how quickly, sometimes you jump to the side of a person who is paid by the state to kind of send your kids to jail, as opposed to the how quickly you jump to the side of black kids. There was this silly Negro who a few years back bought a billboard, pull up your pants. He pounded his chest. He felt so good about himself. I'm telling these kids to pull up your pants. Do you know how much you could have done for a black child? You could have bought a black child that was in foster care some clothes. You could have bought a kid who's in college but doesn't have a lot of money some books. There's so much you could have done except doing that. And we live in this world where black people are more apt to defend, after the sorority. Remember the sorority that sang the hang nigga from a tree song? You saw black people come to the aid of the guy who was the chief singer of that song, and they were standing behind him at a press conference. You'll stand behind this guy at a press conference after he sang a song about hanging a black person from a tree, about lynching a black person, but you wanna berate and castigate black boys for sagging their pants and jump. What kind of people are you? Who have you become? I mean, this girl who pulled out her phone during class was charged with something called disturbing schools. And disturbing schools is nothing but a made-up law that gives them reason to throw your child in jail. That's all it is. And a girl who came to her defense and just yelled about what was happening, she also was taken to jail and charged. That's what you should be outraged about. You shouldn't be talking to me or anybody else about, she shouldn't have put out her phone in school. Since when is pulling out your phone in school a reason for a crime? When I was in school, pulling out your phone in school or doing something or disrupting class, that was reason to go to the principal's office. And if you didn't get up and go, you would get your parents' call. You may have detention after that. There was going to be a scene, but nobody was going to go to jail. I told on my Facebook page at the middle school, I was in a fight. I didn't go to jail. It was broken up, and that was the end of it. I think I got suspended, but I didn't get handcuffed. I didn't get pulled across the floor. What are you allowing to happen to your children? That's something that we should think about. Why these two kids who were being kids, the same kind of kid you used to be, And now they're charged with the crime. What are we allowing to happen to these children, and what are we doing about it? And why are we justifying it? Some of you should be ashamed at what you said after this girl was dragged across the floor by this hulky, incredible Hulk looking cop. You should be ashamed of yourselves. We should be ashamed of ourselves for not calling that out. So, I mean, that's something that we should think about. And, I just, there's more than one Don Lemon in this crew of black people in this country, and we need to call all of them out.